My ex-wife vanished 13 years ago, leaving her autistic son with me. When his painting sold for $3.9 million, she returned with a lawyer smiling. I said, let her take it. Evan whispered, let me handle it. The courthouse in Allen County smelled like floor wax and old paper. The air conditioner rattled like a loose panel in an elevator cab. Dana sat 3 rows ahead in a cream blazer, spine straight, not once turning around. Her attorney, young Glossy Sharp, kept whispering in her ear like he owned the room. My lawyer, Curtis Vaughn, leaned close. Ray, listen to me. She can file for control. She's the biological mother. She can argue Evan isn't competent to manage money. My throat felt tight. 13 years of white-knuckling it, and now this. Let her take it, I said, because I was tired of fighting and terrified of losing Evan in public. Curtis blinked. Ray. Evan's hand touched my forearm. Light. Steady. He didn't look at Dana. He stared at the wood grain on the bench like it held instructions. He leaned in, voice calm and flat in that way strangers misunderstand. Let me handle it. That whisper dragged me backward, back to the night Dana walked out of our little ranch house in Fort Wayne, like she was stepping out of a bad movie and into a better one. It was late October. Wind shoved at the siding. Rain ticked the porch roof. I'd just come home from a job downtown hotel, stuck relay on an old Otis unit still smelling like machine oil and sweat. Evan was 4 then. No words, just routines. Same PBS station, same volume. Peanut butter sandwich cut into 2 exact triangles. Toy cars lined up on the coffee table, red to blue, bumper to bumper, like a silent parade. Dana came in late, perfume, first expensive floral wrong for our kitchen. The front door slapped hard. Evan jerked like he'd been shocked. Hands to ears. Rocking started fast and tight. He made that little hiccup sound that meant panic was rising. Dana, I said, keeping my voice low, easy. I'm in my own house, Ray, she snapped, kicking off her heels. One hit the baseboard with a hollow thunk. I'm done tiptoeing. I dropped onto the carpet beside Evan and hummed the 3-note tune that usually brought him down. My shoulder touched his. His breathing stuttered, then tried to match mine. Dana watched us like we were a mess she'd stepped in. Look at you, she said. You're turning into him. That hit deeper than it should have, because part of me was already shrinking my world to fit Evan's needs because somebody had to. What is this really about, I asked. She pulled her purse off the counter. Keys jingled too loud. I met someone, she said like she was announcing she'd found a better job. My mouth went dry. Who? It doesn't matter, she said, then softened into a rehearsed voice. He's stable. He has a place in Naples. Sunshine. A real life. A real life, I repeated. Dana's eyes flashed. I'm 36. I'm not spending the rest of my life in Fort Wayne trapped by this. This is your son, I said, and pointed without meaning to. Evan peeked at her through his fingers, eyes huge, trying to decode her tone. Donna flinched as if the word son burned. He's my son, she echoed, but it sounded like she was trying the sentence on for size. Evan stood and reached for my hand. He needed anchor. I gave it to him. Dana looked past him. You take him, she said. You're good at this martyr stuff. I'm not a martyr, I said. My voice shook. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. Dana stopped. She brushed past us down the hall. Heel clicks. Closet door squeal. Drawer slam. The sound of a suitcase zipper. Outside headlights washed the living room wall. A black SUV idled at the curb. Rain streaked the window like the glass was crying. You already called him, I said. She didn't deny it. She came back with a small suitcase and her phone in hand. Her face was set like she'd made peace with herself and left the rest of us to suffer. Evan stood in the hallway clutching his red blanket, lips pressed tight. He made a tiny sound, not a cry, more like a question he didn't have words for. Dana didn't kneel, didn't touch his hair, didn't even say his name. She paused at the front door, cold air rushing in. For 1 second she looked back, and I waited for anything, an apology, a promise, even a lie. You'll be fine, Ray, she said instead. You always figure things out. Then she walked into the rain. The SUV door shut with a heavy thunk. Tires hissed on wet pavement, and the taillights bled red down the street until they disappeared. I stood in the doorway holding Evan while the TV kept chirping about letters and colors like nothing had happened. My hands were shaking. Evan's whole body trembled against my chest. That night I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the furnace groan to life. I stared at the schedule on the fridge: therapy, Tuesday preschool, Wednesday, and realized every box now belonged to me. I didn't know then that Evan would find peace in paint. I didn't know a canvas would someday be worth 3.9 million. I only knew a mother had left and a boy had watched her go. 13 years later, Dana came back smiling like she'd lost a suitcase, not a child. After our first meeting with Curtis, I tried to keep things normal. I cut Evan's sandwich into perfect triangles. I set his brushes out in a neat row. In the quiet kitchen, the only sound was the soft rustle of paper from Curtis's folder and the steady hum of the fridge. Evan chewed slowly, eyes down. Then he spoke without looking up. "We should meet her again," he said. My stomach dropped. "Evan, you don't have to." He lifted his gaze and it was steady as a level on a job site. "Yes," he said. "Public place." Then softer, like a secret only meant for me, "one more time." I learned early that raising Evan meant learning a new language, one made of routines, rhythms, and small mercies most people never notice. Mornings started at 6:12 a.m. Sharp, not 6, not 6:15. The clock on the microwave had to read 6:12 when I turned on the kettle, or Evan's shoulders would creep up around his ears like he was bracing for impact. The kettle sang. The furnace clicked. I toasted bread exactly 2 shades darker than pale. I cut the sandwich corner to corner, wiped the knife clean, then cut again. Triangles. Always triangles. If I messed it up even by a hair, Evan didn't yell. He froze. His breath would go shallow. His eyes darted to the window like he was searching for an exit from his own skin. So I learned. I adjusted. I slowed down. That's what love looked like for us: quiet adjustments no one applauded. The grocery store was the hardest. Meijer on Coliseum Boulevard, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry insects. Cartwheels squealing. The beep-beep of scanners punching holes in the air. Evan would clamp his hands over his ears and rock a low sound vibrating in his chest. People stared. Some whispered. A woman once leaned over and said, "Have you tried discipline?" I smiled at her like she'd just offered me gum at a funeral. We survived those years, one receipt, one appointment, one sleepless night at a time. Therapy on Tuesdays. School meetings where acronyms flew like darts, IEP, OTSLP, and I nodded like I understood everything. Bills stacked up in a shoebox by the door. My hands grew rougher, knuckles cracked from years of hauling cables and fixing doors that didn't want to open. Dana never called. Not on Evan's birthday. Not when he lost his first tooth. Not when he learned to tie his shoes at 11 and stood there beaming like he'd climbed Everest. She sent one card in 13 years. No return address. Just mom in loopy handwriting. Evan studied it for a long time, then slid it under a stack of paper and never mentioned it again. It was paint that finally gave him some quiet. I found him one afternoon in the garage, sitting cross-legged on the concrete, a cheap watercolor set I'd bought on clearance spread out like tools. He wasn't painting pictures the way kids usually do. No houses, no trees. He painted a corner of the garage wall, the crack that ran like a lightning bolt from the floor up toward the breaker box. He painted it carefully, patiently, like he was documenting something important. The brush made a soft shh against the paper. Water dripped into a plastic cup with a steady tick. The garage smelled like oil and damp cardboard. I watched from the doorway and didn't interrupt. From then on, painting became part of the routine. After school, before dinner, same stool, same light. Evan lined his brushes in order of size. If one was out of place, he'd fix it without a word. When he painted, the rest of the world faded. The TV could be on the phone, could ring, he didn't flinch. His subjects stayed strange. Close-ups, details, a rusted lock on a shed, the numbers on a utility meter, a stain on a ceiling tile shaped like a continent. He wasn't imagining things. He was recording them. Teachers noticed. An art instructor at Northside High pulled me aside and said, "Your son sees differently." I nodded. I'd known that for years. When the gallery in Chicago called, I thought it was a prank. The woman on the line spoke fast and careful, like she was afraid I'd hang up. She mentioned an auction, interest, serious collectors. I leaned against the kitchen counter and listened to the refrigerator hum while she said numbers that didn't make sense. $3.9 million. I sat down hard. Evan kept painting. The money didn't change him. If anything, it made him quieter. He asked me where money lived and who decided where it went. He asked how signatures worked. He asked why people fought over things they didn't make. Then Dana came back. The letters from her lawyer arrived thick and official, smelling faintly of toner. Curtis Vaughn read them at my table while Evan painted in the next room, brush whispering, water ticking. "They're going to argue guardianship," Curtis said. "They'll say Evan's vulnerable." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "He's not a child." "I know," Curtis said gently, "but the court may not." That night, Evan didn't paint. He sat at the kitchen table with a stack of old folders I hadn't opened in years. School records, therapy notes, medical bills. He sorted them by year, smoothing each page like it mattered. "Dad," he said, not looking up, "when someone leaves, do they leave rights behind too?" My chest tightened. "It depends." "On what?" "On whether they come back," I said, then wished I hadn't. Evan nodded like he'd just confirmed a measurement. Later he asked, if money is for care, who decides what care is? I didn't have a good answer. Over the next few days, I noticed small things. Evan asked to see copies of letters. He asked me to explain words like fiduciary and consent. He asked who kept originals. Once I found him measuring a photograph of Dana with a ruler, then writing a date on the back in neat block letters. I told myself it was curiosity or anxiety. One night long after I'd gone to bed, I heard the soft scrape of a chair on tile. I padded into the kitchen. The only light was the range hood glowing like a moon. Evan sat there surrounded by papers, the sound of them whispering as he moved them into piles. "Evan," I said softly, "it's late." He looked up, eyes clear. "I know." On the table lay a single sheet typed and precise. He slid it toward me. "I want an independent financial advocate," he said. "Not your lawyer, not hers." My mouth went dry. "Why?" "So no one thinks you told me what to do." I stared at the paper, then at my son, the boy I'd carried through grocery stores, the teenager who barely spoke above a whisper, now thinking 3 steps ahead of grown adults. "What are you planning?" I asked. He considered that. Then he shook his head once. "Not planning," he said. "Preparing." Dana suggested the place. "Neutral ground," she said in a text, like she was negotiating a ceasefire. "Somewhere public for Evan." We met at Lori's Family Diner off Lima Road, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been reheated since the Clinton administration. The bell above the door jingled when we walked in. Plates clinked. A waitress called someone Han. Dana was already there. She stood when she saw us, smoothing her cream blazer hair perfect in that effortless way money buys. The smell of her perfume reached me before she did, sweet, expensive, out of place among bacon grease and burnt toast. "Ray," she said softly, like we were old friends. "Hi." She turned to Evan, her smile widening. "Hey, sweetheart." Evan didn't answer. He slid into the booth beside me and set his sketchbook on the table, lining it up with the edge like he always did. His eyes went to the napkin holder, the ketchup bottle, the keys Dana had dropped on the table, silver heavy, with a black fob bearing a luxury logo I didn't recognize. Her lawyer arrived moments later, all confidence and shine. "Matthew Cole," he introduced himself, shaking my hand too firmly. His suit was sharp, his watch brighter than the overhead lights. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "we appreciate you meeting with us." He sat beside Dana close enough that their shoulders touched. She didn't move away. Matthew opened a leather folder and began talking like he was reading from a brochure. "Our goal is cooperation. What's in Evan's best interests?" Evan's pen moved. Scratch, pause, scratch again. Dana leaned forward. "I know I made mistakes," she said, voice trembling, just enough to sound real. "I was young. I was scared. I didn't understand what Evan needed." I felt my jaw tighten. "But I've grown," she continued. "I have stability now, resources, and I want to be part of my son's life." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small red car, setting it gently on the table. "I remember you loved these," she said, eyes shining. Something inside me snapped tight. Evan stared at the toy for a long moment. Then he looked up. "I never had a red car," he said. The table went quiet. Dana laughed too quickly. "Oh, well, you know, kids change." "I had blue," Evan said. "3. You left before I got red." Matthew cleared his throat. "Evan, we understand emotions run high, but we're here to discuss finances. The proceeds from the sale are substantial," Dana finished nodding, "and managing that kind of money can be overwhelming." Evan's pen kept moving. He was drawing now. Not the diner. Not us. He drew Dana's face, but something was off. The smile, too wide, the eyes slightly misaligned. Not cruel, just inaccurate. I watched her watch him. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she masked it. "Ray," she said, turning to me, "you've done a wonderful job, truly. But don't you think it's time you had help?" I heard the pitch beneath the concern, the implication that I was tired, outdated in the way. Matthew nodded. "Courts often appoint guardians in cases like this, to protect the individual." "I don't need protecting," Evan said calmly. Matthew smiled thinly. "That's not for you to decide." Evan stopped drawing. He looked at Dana's keys again, then at her ring, then back to his sketchbook. "Mom," he said. The words sounded new in his mouth. "Do you want money, or do you want truth?" Dana blinked. "I want what's best for you." "That's not an answer," Evan said. The waitress arrived with coffee, setting mugs down too hard. The liquid sloshed. Evan flinched, then steadied himself, palms flat on the table. Matthew leaned back. "Let's not turn this into a philosophical exercise." Evan nodded. "Okay." He closed his sketchbook. The sound was final. We left shortly after. Dana hugged Evan stiffly, her arms awkward, unsure where to land. He didn't hug back. Outside, the wind cut sharp. Cars rushed past. Dana stood by her SUV, smiling like she'd won something. "Think about what we discussed," she said. "We can make this easy." That night, I found Evan at the kitchen table again. The overhead light buzzed faintly. Papers were spread out in neat rows. Dates, names, notes written in block letters. "Evan," I said, rubbing my temples, "you don't owe her anything." "I know," he said. "Then why meet her?" He slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of letters, Dana's lawyer's letters with handwritten notes in the margins. Dates circled, words underlined. "She talks a lot," Evan said. "People who talk forget what they say." I swallowed. "What are you doing?" He met my eyes, listening. A few days later, Curtis called. "They're pushing for private mediation," he said. "Fast. They want signatures." Evan shook his head when I told him. He typed something on his laptop and printed it out, the machine whirring softly in the quiet house. "I want a public hearing," he said, handing me the page. "Open court." My heart pounded. "Evan, that's risky." He nodded once. "Yes." "And if we lose?" He considered that, then looked at me the way he had when he was small and needed me to explain the world. "Then everyone will see why." The next morning, Dana sent an email agreeing to the hearing. Her confidence bled through the screen. That evening, Evan asked me to retrieve one painting from the garage. Not the biggest, not the one with color. A small piece, gray tones, sharp lines. An image of a wall, a lock, and a shadow stretching just out of frame. "Bring this," he said. "Only this." I stared at it uneasy. "Why this one?" Evan didn't answer right away. He packed his folder, carefully squared the corners, and slid it into his backpack. "Because," he said, "finally they think they've already won." The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, listening to the house settle, every pop and creak sounding like a warning. The refrigerator hummed. The clock over the stove ticked too loud. My hands ached in that deep way they get when rain's coming, the kind of ache that starts in the bones and reminds you how long you've been using them. At 58, I'd spent a lifetime fixing things that move people up and down safely. Elevators don't forgive mistakes. You learn patience. You learn checks and double checks. Still standing on the edge of open court with my son's future on the line felt like the riskiest job I'd ever taken. Curtis called late, his voice low. "Ray, they're offering mediation again. Quiet settlement, split control. It would avoid exposure." "Exposure," I repeated. "You mean daylight?" He sighed. "Public hearings get messy. Judges are human, juries even more so." After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Dana's smile in the diner. The way Matthew Cole talked like the room belonged to him. The way Evan had sat still, absorbing everything. Around midnight, I heard Evan's door open. Soft footsteps. He padded into the kitchen, careful like he always was at night. I watched from the couch as he turned on the under-cabinet light, just bright enough to work. He set his backpack on the table and opened it. Papers came out, straightened, aligned. He laid the small painting beside them, the one with the lock. I pushed myself up, joints protesting, and joined him. "You should be sleeping," I said. "I will," he said. "After." "After what?" He didn't look at me. He checked his list, crossing something off with a neat, deliberate line. "Evan," I said gently, "I need to know what you're doing. If this goes bad, he stopped. Slowly, he turned to face me. Dad, he said, and there was no rush in his voice. You fix elevators. I blinked. Yeah. You always told me, he continued, the most dangerous part is when people think it's safe. I swallowed. That's true. They think it's safe, he said, because they don't see what's behind the wall. He tapped the painting lightly. Once, I do. The next morning, Dana's email came in early. We can still resolve this privately, she wrote. For Evan's sake, 50-50, no spectacle. My finger hovered over the reply button. 50-50 sounded like peace. It sounded like rest. It sounded like not having to sit in a room full of strangers while my life got dissected. I looked at Evan. He was tying his shoes, pulling each lace to the same tension, focused and calm. She's offering to settle, I said. He nodded. I know. How do you know? She's rushing, he said. People rush when time stops helping them. I exhaled. If I don't sign, this gets ugly. It's already ugly, he said, matter of fact. Then he looked up at me. Please don't sign. I didn't. The courthouse steps were cold under my palms as we waited to go in. Reporters hovered at a distance, local news, a couple of freelancers. I hated that part. Hated that Evan's face might end up on a screen with words like autistic teen and millions slapped on it like bait. Dana arrived in a tailored gray suit flanked by Matthew. She gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ray, she said, last chance. Evan stood beside me, backpack on his shoulders, painting wrapped carefully in brown paper under his arm. Inside, the courtroom smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. The judge's bench loomed high. The murmur of voices ebbed and flowed like water. Curtis leaned close. Once this starts, we can't control the narrative. I know, I said. Donna took her seat and crossed her legs. She looked relaxed, confident, like someone who believed the system had always worked for her. The judge called the case, voices hushed, chairs scraped. Matthew spoke first, smooth as glass. He talked about concern, about protection, about Evan's limitations, about Dana's regret and growth. He painted her as a mother returning to right a wrong. Dana dabbed at her eyes. Not enough to smudge makeup, just enough to sell it. My turn came and my mouth felt full of cotton. Curtis did most of the talking, but the judge asked me directly, Mr. Mercer, why did you agree to an open hearing? I glanced at Evan. He nodded once. Because, I said, voice rough, this isn't just about money. It's about what happened when my wife left and who stayed. Dana shifted. The judge turned to Evan. Young man, do you understand what's happening here? Evan stood. The room seemed to lean toward him. Yes, he said. Matthew rose immediately. Your Honor, given Evan's condition, we question whether... I understand, Evan said again calmly. The judge raised a hand. I'll decide who speaks. Evan took a breath. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He simply opened his folder. He started with dates, simple, clear. When Dana left, when she didn't return calls, when she missed meetings, when Ray signed a loan. Each page made a quiet sound as he set it on the table. Paper on wood, steady. Matthew tried to interrupt. The judge shut him down. Then Evan unwrapped the painting. The paper crinkled softly. The room leaned in. He held it up, not dramatic, not high, just enough for the judge to see. This is why I paint, Evan said. I don't paint feelings, I paint facts. Dana frowned. That lock, Evan continued, pointing, is on a rental property in Naples. The serial number is visible. It was replaced without a permit. Matthew scoffed. Relevance. Evan didn't look at him. The date I painted it, he said, matches the date the previous tenant reported an illegal lockout. A murmur rippled through the room. I felt my pulse in my ears. I hadn't known. Not this. Evan set the painting down and looked at the judge. I put the money in a trust before today, he said, with an independent advocate. It's legal. It's documented. Dana's face drained of color. I didn't do this to hurt anyone, Evan said. I did it so no one could take what they didn't earn. The judge leaned forward. Dana stood suddenly. This is manipulation, she said, voice sharp, now the mask slipping. He's being coached. Evan turned to her. His voice didn't change. You taught me to watch carefully, he said. You just forgot I was watching. The room went still. Outside, after the ruling, after the judge confirmed the trust and denied Dana's claim, Dana followed us down the steps. This isn't over, she hissed close enough that I could smell her perfume again. Evan stopped. He turned slow and deliberate. You said that he said evenly in front of witnesses. She froze. I put my hand on his shoulder. For the first time, I felt like I was the one being held steady. The judge didn't rule that day. That was the part no one tells you about how justice can pause mid-breath and leave everyone suspended. We were told to return the following week. Additional documentation requested. Clarifications. Time for review. Dana's lawyer objected loudly. The judge shut him down with a look that could have stopped a freight elevator. Outside the courthouse steps buzzed with voices. Reporters leaned in. Cameras clicked. Curtis whispered something about procedure, but I barely heard him. My head rang like I'd stepped off a noisy job site. Dana didn't speak to me this time. She walked fast, heels sharp against the concrete, Matthew Cole half a step behind her. Her smile was gone. In the car, Evan buckled his seatbelt with the same careful pull he always used. Click, pause, tug, secure. You okay? I asked. Yes, he said. I waited. He usually added more when he was ready. They are afraid now, he said finally. Who we? The ones who talked the most. The week that followed felt longer than the 13 years before it. Curtis called daily. Dana's side filed motions, requests, objections. Each envelope that arrived made my stomach tighten. At night, my hands shook when I poured coffee. I snapped at a neighbor for letting his dog bark too long and apologized 10 minutes later. Evan stayed steady. He painted less. When he did, it was smaller pieces, details again, numbers, edges, shadows. I didn't ask what they meant. On the morning of the ruling, the courthouse was packed. Word had gotten out. A millionaire teenager, an abandoned child, a mother's claim. People love simple villains and heroes even when life refuses to be simple. We sat on the same wooden bench. The air conditioner rattled louder than before, or maybe I was just listening harder. Dana entered last. She wore black this time. No smile. Her eyes scanned the room, measuring exits. Matthew whispered, fast flipping pages. His confidence looked thinner now, stretched too tight. The judge took the bench. The room rose, then settled. This court has reviewed the evidence. The judge began, voice level. The documentation presented by the minor Evan Caldwell is thorough. My heart thudded. The trust established prior to the initial hearing complies with state law. It is independently managed. There is no legal basis to dissolve it. Dana's head snapped up. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court finds no grounds for guardianship over the minor's finances by the petitioner. A murmur swept the room. Dana stood. Your Honor. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. She did, slowly. Her face was rigid now, all softness gone. This court also notes, the judge said, eyes on Dana, that abandonment is not erased by regret expressed after financial gain becomes apparent. That landed like a dropped weight. I'm denying the petition in full. For a moment, no one moved. Then sound rushed back in gasps, whispers, the scrape of chairs. A reporter's pen scratched furiously. Evan exhaled, just once. I realized he'd been holding his breath. Dana didn't cry. She stood gathering her purse with shaking hands and turned toward Evan. Her voice cut through the noise, sharp and brittle. You think you've won, she said. You don't know what you've done. Evan looked at her, really looked. Then he spoke clear and calm, every word measured. I know exactly what I've done, he said. I made sure the truth stayed where everyone could see it. The room fell quiet again. Dana's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed unsure what to say. She left without another word. Outside, the cameras swarmed. Curtis tried to shield us, but Evan stopped him. It's okay, Evan said. A reporter called out, Evan, why did you do this? He thought about it. The wind tugged at his jacket. The courthouse flag snapped overhead. Because he said money should follow responsibility. That was it. No speech, no drama. We walked away. At home that night, the house felt different. Quieter, lighter, like a machine finally running without grinding. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. Cicadas buzzed. A neighbor's lawnmower droned in the distance. Normal sounds. Good sounds. I was scared, I admitted, staring at my hands. I almost signed. Evan nodded. I know. I didn't want to lose you, I said. You didn't, he said simply. He looked out at the yard, then back at me. You stayed, he added. That mattered. I swallowed hard. Later, as he headed inside, Evan paused at the door. Dad. Yeah, Mum. Thank you for letting me handle it. I watched him go, thinking about all the times I'd carried him through noise and chaos, believing I was the strong one. Turns out strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. The house settled into its old rhythms again, the kind you only notice after a storm passes. Morning light crept through the kitchen blinds. The coffee maker gurgled and clicked. I stood at the counter rubbing sleep from my eyes while Evan sat at the table lining up his mug with the edge like always. Same routines, same quiet, but something underneath had shifted. The money stayed where it belonged, behind layers of signatures and safeguards I barely understood. Curtis handled the paperwork. An independent advocate took over the numbers. I didn't ask Evan for details. I trusted him the way he'd trusted me all those years when I said, "I've got you." Dana didn't call. Weeks passed, then months. A letter arrived once, no apology, just a notice of address change in Florida. I slid it into a drawer and didn't mention it. Evan never asked. One afternoon, I found him in the garage again painting. The brush whispered against the paper. Water ticked in the cup. The familiar smells, oil dust, cardboard wrapped around us like an old coat. He wasn't painting locks or numbers this time. He painted the porch light at dusk, the way it cast a soft circle on the concrete. "Different," I said. He nodded. "It's quieter." He began setting aside a portion of the money for a legal advocacy group that helped families like ours, parents raising kids with autism who couldn't afford lawyers when things went sideways. He asked me to read the mission statement, asked my opinion, asked not told. On a cool evening, we sat on the porch steps, cicadas buzzing like static in the trees. My knees ached. Evan rocked gently, content. "I used to think I said that protecting you meant keeping the world away." He thought about that. "You taught me how to stand in it." That stayed with me. For 13 years, I believed I was the only one paying attention, watching schedules, watching signs, watching for cracks. Turns out Evan had been watching too, quietly, carefully, learning which details mattered and which people showed you who they were when they thought no one noticed. Justice didn't come with fireworks. It came with paperwork and patience, and a boy who refused to be rushed into someone else's story. If this story made you stop and think about who stays, about what responsibility really looks like, share it with someone who's carried more than they were supposed to. And if you want more true-to-life stories about quiet strength and hard-earned justice, consider subscribing. Sometimes the loudest moment is the one where someone finally speaks and everyone listens.